is that we both know that there has been a sharp incline as it relates to threats upon our lives. Regardless of what side of the aisle you sit on, we both know and agree that as sitting members of Congress, we both are enduring more death threats than anybody should in this country. To have the sitting Attorney General go on, and I'm gonna call it faux news. I know some of y'all love it, but it's fake to me. To have her go on Fox News and to then decide that she wanted to send a threat to me, it was wrong. Because here it is, she is the highest law enforcement agent in this country, and people are watching and they are consuming this information and they are believing that simply because I decided that I wanted to exercise my right to free speech, which I am not abridged from doing, that she then wanted to then politicize something that should not be politicized.
I now recognize the ranking member of the subcommittee, Jasmine Crockett.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. And I first just want to begin with a news alert. Guess what? Joe Biden is not the president anymore. So maybe we can move on. Maybe we can move into the present, because it seems like we are living in the past. And listen, these are not the good old days, you know, like you used to sit around and your grandparents would talk to you about what used to happen. What we need to be talking about is how we are going to legislate, because I think that some of my colleagues have confused what our jobs are. And I get that we're sitting in judiciary. And so it may seem as if we are here to be litigators, but we are here to be legislators, which means that we are supposed to be writing laws, not trying to have our own trials and determine whether or not something is true or not, or whatever the case is, or who should be sued, who shouldn't be sued. All I know is that a great American hero, a good senator out of New Jersey, said something to the effect yesterday as he was shattering the record for holding the floor, a record that had been held by another racist in this country. As he shattered that, he said something about the fact that this should not be about left versus right. It should be about right versus wrong. And I am going to tell you that I want us to focus on right versus wrong. The reason that we are struggling right now in this country as it relates to people not trusting agencies, honestly, a lot of it is because of elected leaders. Let me tell you, one of the things that the chairman and I actually agree upon, we don't agree on a lot, is that we both know that there has been a sharp incline as it relates to threats upon our lives. Regardless of what side of the aisle you sit on, we both know and agree that as sitting members of Congress, we both are enduring more death threats than anybody should in this country. And I believe that it is because of the divisive rhetoric, and it is because of the selective enforcement of things. And so when we have, and I'm gonna be clear, because I had remarks and I'm going a whole other way. To have the sitting Attorney General go on, and I'm gonna call it faux news. I know some of y'all love it, but it's fake to me. To have her go on Fox News and to then decide that she wanted to send a threat to me, it was wrong. Because here it is, she is the highest law enforcement agent in this country, and people are watching and they are consuming this information and they are believing that simply because I decided that I wanted to exercise my right to free speech, which I am not abridged from doing, that she then wanted to then politicize something that should not be politicized. I don't like Elon Musk. I'm gonna say it 50,000 times. I don't like him. I don't like that he going out there and he firing people. I think that he's a crook, because somehow the rest of us can't sit around and get whatever federal contracts we want. The rest of us can't sit around and get law enforcement and get them somehow ordained as federal law enforcement to protect him. The rest of us can't get our dealerships protected by the federal government. That is somebody that is operating above the law. For whatever reason, just because he has a lot of money, more money than everybody else. And yes, I am happy to see that on my birthday, which is what I said, there were peaceful protests around this world against him, because he is a problem. And so you never should have somebody that is sitting that high and is going to sit up here and threaten a sitting member of Congress when she knew good and well, if she watched the entire thing, that I specifically told protesters to make sure you consult with lawyers, just like I've told protesters over and over and over in the history of me advising people to go out and exercise their constitutional right. The fact that there are other sitting members that have received letters of threat from this new DOJ tells me that they are about retribution and they are not about following the law. The reason that our party, or I won't even say our party, our country is torn apart is because we can't even agree on right versus wrong. This should not be left versus right. The only thing that we're asking is that we have law enforcement that will show up when there is an actual crime. If somebody calls and says, hey, I need you to investigate this cyber crime, or I need you to investigate this child pornography, or I need you to investigate this robbery, then we want somebody to show up, and we don't want them to look at us and act as if just because I'm black or because I'm woman that I am not worthy of having that case investigated, because we have an administration that is continuously railing against diversity, equity, and inclusion, or we don't need people that show up that feel like diversity should not be valued. That is why we should have somebody that may show up and looks like me. The final thing that I'll say, because you've been gracious, is this. When I first became a public defender, I had no criminal defense experience. And I walked in and I told my boss, Charlie, I said, listen, you should hire me. He said, why? I said, because I'm black. Charlie looked at me like I was crazy. And I said, let me tell you something. When I walk in, I'm going to walk in with a level of rapport and understanding then maybe some of my other colleagues will not. Charlie offered me my job, and I worked my butt off, and I worked really, really hard for all of my clients, not just those that look like me, and that is what it looks like to serve. Thank you. I want to add one more point. As a civil rights attorney, I have had to sue law enforcement. There have been times that I can truly say that law enforcement has crossed the line. And I truly believe that there can be one or two in a bunch that can ruin everyone. The problem that I have right now, though, is that we have decided to focus in on something that my Republican colleagues have decided to term as being political. What is political is when somebody says that they are going to come back and seek retribution. What is political is firing people because they simply were following the evidence and doing their jobs as law enforcement has been trained to do. And ultimately, regardless of whether or not anyone believes that it was right to indict the president, not once, not twice, not three, but 4 times he was indicted, ultimately, each of you knows enough to know that at the end of the day, it is citizens that sit on a grand jury that are the ones that decide whether or not evidence exists to go forward with an indictment. And ultimately, when this president was convicted by a jury on the state level, it was a jury of his peers. And so I want to say thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for your commitment, and thank you so much for the testimony that you will provide. With that, I will yield back. This is Secretary of Homeland Security, Kristi Noem. Not only has Secretary Noem been busy filming propaganda ads, she's also been busy cashing in on millions of taxpayer dollars. In fact, Secretary Noem has funneled millions of dollars to a company called the Strategy Group. The Strategy Group helped Secretary Noem win her campaign to become the governor of South Dakota. Corey Lewandowski, her top policy advisor, has worked with the firm. And the company's CEO is married to Secretary Noem's chief spokesperson, Mrs. Tricia McLaughlin. This is what corruption looks like. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and thank you for calling this hearing. Since January, Donald Trump has used the full power of the federal government to attack Americans in cities across the country. In Donald Trump's America, you are at increased risk of experiencing militaristic operations in your home, increased risk of being subject to detainment by mass thugs and wannabe vigilantes, increased risk of suffering injuries due to reckless and illegal acts by rogue federal agents, increased risk of being deported to foreign nations even if you are an American citizen, and you're at an increased risk of being targeted by federal government for criticizing the president and his friends. Congressional Republicans have completely abandoned their Article I powers and have exchanged their responsibility to their constituents with fealty to the president. They have allowed the president to morph federal agencies into instruments of autocracy. And as a result, the president has been able to ignore federal law, disregard court orders, and implement the largest pay-for-play scheme in American history. The White House, well, what's left of it anyway, is literally up for sale. The federal courts have characterized this presidency as, quote, lawless. In fact, when ruling against illegal acts committed by the administration, a Republican-appointed federal judge stated, quote, "The court cannot imagine how the public interest might be served by permitting federal officials to flaunt the very laws they have sworn to enforce." In a separate case where the administration was sued for unlawful acts, the judge, also a Republican appointee, stated, quote, "Allowing constitutional rights to be dependent upon the grace of the executive branch would be a dereliction of duty by this third and independent branch of government and would be against the public interest." But in another case, the court summed it up perfectly by declaring, quote, "As is becoming far too common, we are confronted again with the efforts of the executive branch to set aside the rule of law in pursuit of its own goals." Judiciary Committee Republicans have been completely complicit in this corruption. But since they're so interested in restoring law and order, I have a couple of suggestions on where they can start. Number one, this is the President of the United States standing beside his best friend, Jeffrey Epstein. As we all know, Mr. Epstein is one of the most notorious sexual predators in American history. For 8 weeks, the Republicans on this committee have chosen to protect these two men instead of providing justice to Mr. Epstein's victims. Now the administration is panicking. First, they campaigned on releasing the Epstein files. Then AG Bondi and associates did a photo op with the files, and she said, and I quote, "The Epstein list is on my desk." Then somehow the Epstein list didn't exist. Then the Epstein files became a Democratic hoax. Now the president is supposedly supportive of releasing the files, even though he's currently ignoring a congressional subpoena to do so. Now the president is simply crashing out. And it's because he can't seem to explain his special decades-long relationship with one of the most prominent sexual predators in American history. It's already public that he's in the Epstein files, but his administration is hiding the context of his involvement, if any, with Mr. Epstein's horrific crimes. Now, this is Miss Ghislaine Maxwell. Miss Maxwell, who obviously helped Jeffrey Epstein traffic more than 1,000 women and girls, well, Donald Trump is now giving her special treatment while she's serving out her prison sentence. He won't even rule out giving her a pardon or commuting her sentence. I don't need to explain why pardoning sex traffickers wouldn't be restoring law and order. Now, this is Secretary of Homeland Security, Kristi Noem. Not only has Secretary Noem been busy filming propaganda ads, she's also been busy cashing in on millions of taxpayer dollars. In fact, Secretary Noem has funneled millions of dollars to a company called the Strategy Group. The Strategy Group helped Secretary Noem win her campaign to become the governor of South Dakota. Corey Lewandowski, her top policy advisor, has worked with the firm. And the company's CEO is married to Secretary Noem's chief spokesperson, Mrs. Tricia McLaughlin. This is what corruption looks like. They're stealing money from the American people's pockets and depositing it into their bank accounts. Now we move on to yet somebody else. This is the so-called border czar, Tom Homan. Mr. Homan is on tape accepting $50,000 in cash bribes stuffed in a brown paper bag from an undercover FBI agent. Apparently, Mr. Homan accepted these bribes in exchange for awarding federal contracts to his friends. Trump's Department of Justice killed the investigation into Mr. Homan's crimes, and congressional Republicans didn't say a mumbling word. Lastly, this is insurrectionist and Nazi sympathizer Ed Martin. It appears that Mr. Martin is functioning as the Associate Deputy Attorney General, Pardon Attorney, Director of the Fake Weaponization Working Group, and Special Attorney for Mortgage Fraud. All that means is that Mr. Martin is Trump's lapdog, whom the president sends to initiate lawsuits against the president's perceived political opponents. This is what we call organized crime. They're breaking the law, often by stealing taxpayer dollars, covering up their crimes by ending and obstructing investigations, then prosecuting people who call out their unlawful behavior. And while the Republicans are encouraging this corruption, they're abandoning actual victims of violent crime and ignoring the Republican-led state's 21st century murder crisis. In September's appropriation markup, congressional Republicans proposed reducing the FBI staff by thousands of positions and underfunding the agency by more than $1 billion. They've proposed slashing resources from the ATF. They've proposed cutting grants for juvenile justice programs and hate crimes and eliminating the community violence intervention and prevention grants. They're literally defunding the police. So no matter what they say at today's hearing, congressional Republicans have proven that they are not investing in keeping American communities safe from violent crime. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.